Hi, hope you all are doing great. I'm just here at school making lots of lessons for you, and I hope that you're going to enjoy this reading lesson today. Something I wanted to talk about was our just celebrating that we finished Night of the Spadefoot Toads, and I'm looking over your themes, and this is not the last time we're going to talk about theme, and some of you might see yourself working in some small groups, working on some of the fictional skills we've worked on already with Night of the Spadefoot Toads. But it's time to get into some nonfiction. Yay! So I want you to think about for a second, what is nonfiction? And think, how is fiction and nonfiction different from one another? So think about that for a second. We just finished a fiction book, Night of the Spadefoot Toads. Many of you are reading fictional selections. And what's the difference between the fiction that we've been reading versus nonfiction? Well, some of these pictures might give you some clues. A frog's life, and here an autobiography. I am Malala, meaning she wrote this about herself. Great book, by the way, if you're looking for an autobiography to read. Let's dive in a little bit more about what the difference is between fiction and nonfiction. Let's investigate. So we're going to talk about the difference between fiction and nonfiction today before we really dive into a nonfiction text. And today I'm going to have you read a nonfiction text just to start wrapping your head around the difference between fiction and nonfiction. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the difference is between fiction and nonfiction. Let's go ahead and look at the fiction side. Fiction is to entertain us. So many of you picking up fantasies or realistic fiction, historical fiction. We read to enjoy, and we read in order. We have to read fiction books from the beginning to the middle to the end in the same sequence. And fiction stories include characters, settings, events. They include the plot and or a problem and a solution in the story. Some of the genres that you've been reading, such as the things I've mentioned, like fantasy, science fiction, historical fiction, realistic fiction, folk tales, fairy tales, all of those types of genres are considered fiction. Now we're going to focus moving forward, not forgetting about fiction, because we're going to continue to read fiction, but we're going to move into doing some nonfiction reading. And nonfiction, the purpose for reading nonfiction is to learn. Like I found new facts about snakes, or we read an autobiography about someone's life that they wrote about themselves, or a biography that somebody wrote about someone else. And we learned facts about their life, or an informational book that can be on the solar system, on reptiles, on how to eat healthy. Lots of different topics for nonfiction. Reread for information. And we can read in any order. Sometimes it makes more sense to read nonfiction in order, obviously, our autobiographies and biographies. But when we read informational, sometimes in a reptile book, we might turn to a couple pages that we want to learn more about a particular area of that topic versus reading the book from beginning to end. Also, nonfiction books include text features. And we're going to learn about text features and how text features help us understand nonfiction reading. There's things such as the table of contents, index, they bold words, they italicize words and highlight things for us in the text. There's a glossary, there's lots of photographs, captions, diagrams, labels, maps, charts, and graphs. And these are just a few of the text features that we find in nonfiction reading. We'll talk more heavily about nonfiction text features very soon after we dive into what nonfiction reading is. So today, our goal as readers is I can tell the difference between fiction and nonfiction. That's it. And today you're going to read a nonfiction text that I have linked to our reading section. And you're going to just really get familiar with like, what is nonfiction reading? And how is it different than fiction reading? So that way we understand the difference between fiction and nonfiction, which I know many of you and hoping you know that already. Tomorrow, we're going to dive into what we do before we start reading a nonfiction piece, and then what we do during and what we do after reading. And then we're going to talk about some of the specific types of components that go along with nonfiction reading, like text features and finding the main idea, not the theme. Just a few of many lessons that we will dive into. So today, after you finish this video, you're going to go ahead and click the nonfiction text that I provided for you. You're going to read it. And then you're going to make sure you follow the next steps on the reading plan for today. So today, what is the difference between fiction and nonfiction? Get familiar with nonfiction, because we're going to go straight ahead and learn lots of different ways that help us as readers read nonfiction. During your independent reading time today, I'd love for you to read some nonfiction. However, if you'd like to read fiction, that is okay as well, because you will be reading a nonfiction text before you get to your independent reading today. That is all for now, and tomorrow I will be back with another lesson talking about nonfiction reading.